There is a kind of person you may have seen without realizing what you were looking at. They are not particularly wealthy. They do not have a large family gathered around them on weekends. They live quietly, sometimes alone, in a way that the world tends to overlook. And yet, when you sit near them, something shifts. There is a steadiness in how they hold themselves. Not happiness. Exactly. Something deeper than happiness. Something that does not need a reason to exist. And then there is another kind of person. Someone who has more people, more history, more of what we are told to build toward, and yet, when you look closely, you can see a restlessness underneath it all, a low hum of anxiety that never fully goes away, a feeling of not quite landing. Most of us, somewhere after 60, begin to sense the difference between these two people. We start to understand that what we spent our lives accumulating is not necessarily what will carry us through the years ahead. And that understanding, quiet as it arrives, is both unsettling and, if we let it, profoundly freeing. In this talk, we are not going to talk about what you need to add to your life. We are going to look at 7 things, only 7, that actually hold the weight of this season. Not the things the world told you to worry about. The things that, when they are present, make old age not just bearable, but honest, and sometimes even beautiful. The Buddha once described his teachings the way you might describe a raft. You use it to cross the river, he said, but once you have crossed, you do not strap it to your back and carry it up the mountain. What serves you now is not always what will serve you later. And part of the wisdom of getting older is learning to set down the raft that got you here and notice what is actually needed for the terrain ahead. A body that still carries you. Let us begin with something simple. Something so ordinary that we forget it entirely until it begins to go. Your body. Not a perfect body. Not the body of 30, or 40, or even 50. Just a body that still cooperates enough to let you move through your day without needing to ask for help every hour. The ability to rise from a chair without calculating the effort, to walk to the kitchen and prepare your own food, to step outside, feel the air on your face, and choose entirely on your own which direction to go. These things sound unremarkable, and that is exactly the point. When you are young, physical ability is invisible like oxygen, like water. You do not see it because it is simply there. But after 60, it begins to reveal itself as the quiet architecture of your freedom. Everything else rests on top of it. We spend decades chasing what we think will protect us in old age: money, status, the right relationships. And those things matter in their own ways. But none of them can replace the particular dignity that comes from handling your own life, from not being a burden, from still being the author of your smallest daily decisions. The Buddhist teachings have always understood this. The body is not an obstacle to awareness, it is the ground of it. Every practice, every moment of stillness, every ordinary act of noticing, all of it happens here, in this physical form, in this life. The body is not something to transcend. It is something to inhabit, carefully and with gratitude, for as long as it will have you. This is not a call to extreme effort. It is almost the opposite. The invitation here is consistency, the kind that is so undramatic it rarely gets praised. A walk taken at the same hour each morning. Joints kept moving. Enough sleep. Enough water. The 10,000 small decisions that made repeatedly over years quietly build a kind of protection around your future self. Your body is not your enemy. It is your oldest companion. And like any long relationship, it asks not for perfection, but for attention. 2. An income small enough to forget, steady enough to trust. There is a particular kind of freedom that has almost nothing to do with wealth. It is the freedom that arrives when you stop calculating. When you wake in the morning and the first thought in your mind is not about money, not about whether there is enough, not about what might run out, not about the next unexpected cost waiting around the corner. That absence of calculation, quiet as it is, changes the entire texture of a day. This is not about being rich. Richness and stability are not the same thing, and people who have spent time with both will often tell you they are not even close. Wealth can exist alongside constant anxiety. Modest income, when it is reliable, can exist alongside something that looks from the outside almost like peace. The Buddhist teaching of knowing enough is sometimes misunderstood as a call to poverty. It is not. It is a call to clarity, the recognition that beyond a certain point, accumulating more does not reduce fear. It often quietly increases it, because now there is more to protect, more to lose, more to manage. What actually reduces fear is not abundance. It is predictability. Knowing that the basic things, shelter, food, the occasional medical cost are covered, not forever, not infinitely, but for now, for this month, for this year. When that knowing is in place, something in the nervous system loosens. The background noise of worry, and for many people, that noise has been running so long they have forgotten it is there, begins to fade. And in the silence it leaves behind. A person can finally start to hear themselves think, to notice what they actually want from a day, to be present in the small moments instead of mentally somewhere else, calculating the next thing. Think of financial stability the way you might think of a floor beneath your feet. When the floor is solid, you forget it is there, and that forgetting is the gift. You simply walk. You move through your life without checking every few steps whether the ground will hold. The anxiety that used to live in your feet moves out, and what replaces it is something quieter and far more valuable. Peace is not a feeling that arrives and stays. It is what remains when worry finally runs out of things to say. 3. A rhythm that holds the day together. When people imagine freedom, they often imagine the absence of structure. No schedule, no obligations. Waking up whenever the body decides, doing whatever the mood suggests. And for a short time, a week, a month, perhaps a season of retirement that can feel exactly like freedom. But then something shifts. Days begin to blur. Morning drifts into afternoon with nothing to mark the crossing. Evenings arrive, feeling somehow incomplete, though nothing obviously went wrong. The mind, deprived of a shape to rest inside, begins to drift in ways that are not quite peaceful. A restlessness moves in. Not dramatic. Not a crisis. Just a low, steady disorientation, the feeling of floating in open water with no shore in sight. Buddhist monasteries have understood something about this for centuries. The monastic schedule rising before dawn, sitting in stillness, walking, eating at certain hours. Returning to stillness is not designed to restrict the monks who live it. It is designed to free them, not from the day, but within it. When the outer structure is reliable and gentle, the inner life has room to settle. The mind does not have to spend energy deciding what comes next. It already knows. And in that knowing, it relaxes. You do not need a monastery. You need the principle. A simple morning rhythm tea at a certain hour. A walk at the same time each day. Meals with some regularity. These are not achievements. They do not have to look productive from the outside. No one needs to admire them. They only need to be yours, and they only need to exist. Because what they create, quietly and over time, is a container for your days. A riverbank that keeps the water from spreading too thin and disappearing into the ground. There is a teaching from the Zen tradition, not a complex one, that says the most important thing about practice is that you return to it. Not that you do it perfectly, not that you do it impressively, just that you come back. The value of routine in later life is almost identical. It is not what the routine contains. It is the returning that matters. The simple, unremarkable act of showing up for your own day, again and again, in the same gentle way. Routine is not a cage. It is the structure that makes stillness possible. 4. One small reason to step into the morning. Here is something that is rarely said clearly, so let us say it now. What breaks a person in old age is not, most often, loneliness. It is the absence of anticipation. It is waking up and sensing before you have even fully opened your eyes that nothing is waiting for you today. Nothing needs you. Nothing is calling your name. The day stretches ahead, full of hours, and not one of them has a reason attached to it. That feeling does not arrive dramatically. It creeps. It begins as a morning that feels slightly heavier than the one before. Then afternoons that seem to take too long. Then evenings that arrive without anything memorable having passed through them. And over weeks and months, this quiet absence of forward momentum begins to wear something down, not loudly, not all at once, but steadily, the way water wears stone. What protects against this is not grand purpose. It is not a mission. It is not something the world needs to recognize or reward. The Buddhist teaching here is subtle but important. There is a quality of the heart that leans naturally toward life, toward engagement, toward the next moment. Not grasping, not clinging to outcomes, but a simple, gentle orientation forward, like a plant turning toward light. Not striving, just turning. You need one small thing that does that for you each morning. It might be a plant on the windowsill that needs water, a cat that arrives at your feet before you are fully awake, a story you are following, a book half finished, a series you return to in the evenings, a habit of watching the light change at a certain hour from a certain chair, a short walk to the same place. where you sometimes see the same faces, and sometimes just see the sky. None of these things are impressive. That is the point. They do not need to justify themselves to anyone. They only need to be present, small enough to be reliable, yours enough to feel real, and consistent enough that some part of you leans toward them before the day has fully begun. You do not need a purpose the world applauds. You need one small thing that knows your name. And if you have that, even one, then morning is something to step into rather than something to endure. 5. The art of letting go of who you were. This one is harder to talk about. Not because it is complicated, but because it touches something most people have never been given language for. At some point after 60, sometimes gradually, sometimes in a single disorienting moment, many people encounter a specific kind of loss. Not the loss of a person, or a place, or a relationship. The loss of a self. The loss of the identity that organized their days, gave them a role, told them who they were when someone asked. For decades, you were someone, a professional, a provider, a parent at the center of a household, a person with a title, a function, a place in the structure of things. And then, through retirement, through the departure of children, through the natural shifting of life, that role begins to quietly withdraw. The meetings stop. The calls slow down. The place you used to occupy is filled by someone else, or simply ceases to exist. And you are left with a question that feels almost too large to hold. If I am no longer that, then who am I now? This is not a small question. It is, in fact, one of the deepest questions a human being can face. And what makes it so painful, so quietly devastating for many people, is that we were never taught to prepare for it. Buddhist understanding has a name for what is happening here, and the name itself is a kind of relief. The self you built over 40 years. The identity you wore so consistently that you forgot it was something you wore. It was always changing. It was always, in the deepest sense, borrowed, not false. Not something to be ashamed of, but not permanent. Not the whole of you. The role was real. The work it required was real. The love inside it was real. But you were never only the role. That is the thing that needs saying. The director, the mother, the provider, those were expressions of something larger, something that does not retire, does not age out, does not disappear when the title does. Think of a river. When it reaches the sea, it does not cease to exist. It becomes something wider, something without banks. It loses its shape, and in losing its shape, it becomes part of something vast. The Zen teachers sometimes say that what we call the self is less like a stone and more like a wave. The wave rises, moves, and returns to the water. It does not disappear. It changes form. You are not losing yourself in old age. You are being asked, perhaps for the first time, to find out what you are when you are not performing any role for anyone. That is not a loss. It is an invitation. One of the rarest and most difficult invitations a life can offer. The role is over, but you were never just the role. 6. Making peace with the life already lived. When researchers and journalists ask elderly people about their deepest regrets, the answers are rarely what you might expect. They are not usually about the big mistakes, not about the failed business, the difficult marriage, the path not taken. What surfaces again and again, with a consistency that is almost startling, is this the time wasted in worry? The weeks and months and, for some, years spent anxious about things that never happened, or about things that happened and could not be changed. The days consumed by a mind that would not stop circling, would not stop rehearsing, would not stop asking what if. What I wish I had known, many of them say, is that most of the things I worried about never arrived. And the ones that did, I survived them anyway. There is a teaching that has stayed with me on this. The Buddha described suffering not as something that comes from outside us, but as something we create in relationship to what has already happened or might one day happen. He used the image of two arrows. The first arrow is the painful event itself. The second arrow, the one we choose, again and again. Without realizing, it is the story we tell about the event. The self-blame, the replaying, the relentless rehearsal of what we should have done differently. The first arrow. He said, you may not be able to avoid. But the second arrow is always optional. Making peace with the life you have already lived is not the same as pretending it was all fine. It is not toxic positivity. It is not the performance of acceptance. It is something quieter and far more honest than that. It is the recognition that the person who made those decisions, the younger version of you who chose that path, stayed in that situation too long. Missed that moment of connection, was doing the best they could with what they understood at the time. That person was not a finished version of you. They were an earlier one. And here is something worth sitting with: that person no longer exists. Not in the way they did then. You have changed so completely that the one who made those choices is, in a very real sense, someone you used to be. And it is strangely difficult to keep punishing someone who is no longer there. The Buddhist teaching on impermanence applies not just to external things, to seasons and relationships and health, but to the self. The you of 20 years ago was as impermanent as everything else. It rose. It changed. It gave way to you. Now, reading these words, regret, when it will not let go, is a form of time travel. It keeps pulling you back to a version of life that no longer exists, to argue with a version of yourself who is already gone. And the cost of that argument is always the present moment, the only moment in which anything can actually happen. This does not mean the past does not matter. It means you are allowed to let it settle, to look at it without flinching, to understand it honestly, and then gently to stop carrying it into every day that comes after. Regret is arguing with someone who no longer exists, and that someone is you. 7. The ability to sit alone without suffering. We have arrived, finally, at the one that holds all the others. Because underneath every item on this list, the body, the steady income, the routine, the small reason for mourning, the released identity, the made peace with the past, underneath all of it, is a question that does not announce itself loudly, but that shapes everything. It is this: can you be alone with yourself without it becoming a kind of suffering? Not alone in the sense of having no one nearby, alone in the deeper sense, present with your own thoughts, your own silence, your own company, without immediately needing to escape it. This matters more than almost anything else in later life, because no matter how full your days are, no matter how many people love you or call you or visit, there will be long stretches, sometimes very long stretches, where it is simply you and your own mind. And in those stretches, everything becomes clear. If the relationship with yourself is tense, those hours feel heavy. If it is at peace, those same hours can feel spacious. Even restful the way a quiet room feels restful after a long and noisy day. There was once an old monk who had lived alone in a small hermitage for many years. A young student came to visit him and, after sitting with him for a while in silence, finally asked, "Don't you get lonely, living out here by yourself?" The monk looked at the student for a long moment. Then he smiled and said, "I have never found myself to be poor company." This is not a small thing. It is, in many ways, the whole practice. Buddhist teaching has always pointed here not toward some distant state of enlightenment, not toward a life without difficulty, but toward a fundamental ease with what is, with the moment as it actually is, not as you wish it were, with the mind as it actually moves, not as you think it should. The word used in the Pali tradition is a word we might translate simply as equanimity, a quality of inner steadiness that does not depend on conditions being favorable, not indifference, not numbness, just a groundedness that the weather of circumstance cannot fully uproot. To arrive at this is not the work of a week or a year. It is the work of a lifetime, and in this sense, old age is not a cruel joke. It is a final invitation. All the years of loss, of change, of things not going as planned, they have been preparing you for this. They have been slowly, sometimes painfully, loosening the grip of the idea that your peace depends on the world arranging itself a certain way. What remains, when that grip finally loosens, is something that has no name, easy enough for language. But you know it when you find it. You feel it as a kind of arriving not at a destination, but at yourself. The person who was always here, underneath the roles and the worries and the relentless forward motion of a life being built. Silence is only unbearable when you are afraid of what you might hear. And what you are most afraid of hearing, most of the time, is simply the truth of your own presence. The fact that you are here, that you have always been here, that this right now, in this ordinary moment, is enough. There is an image I return to, sometimes, when I think about what it means to age well. It is early morning. The light has just begun. Someone is sitting, not waiting for anything, not avoiding anything, simply sitting, with a cup of something warm in their hands, watching the way the day begins to take shape through a window. There is no one else there. The house is quiet. The day has not yet asked anything of them. And in that person's face, you would have to look carefully to see it. There is something that is not quite happiness, and not quite sadness, and not quite peace, but some combination of all three that only comes from having lived a long time and finally, slowly, stopped fighting the fact of it. They have a body that still carries them, more or less. They have enough, and they know it. Their day has a shape. Somewhere in the morning there is one small thing that belongs to them. They have laid down the person they used to be without pretending it was easy. They have looked at the life behind them and decided, quietly, to stop treating it as a wound. And here, now, in this early light, they are alone. And it is fine. It is more than fine. I want to leave you with a question not to answer right now, but to carry with you into the days ahead. What if old age is not the part of life where things are taken from you, but the part where you finally find out what was always yours?